Come and call the roll.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. I know we also have some Poor People's Campaign delegates in this room, so I would hope that you all will join in the applause. Can we show our screen of state leaders? And what I'm going to do is read through the states, those states that are organizing as part of the Poor People's Campaign, and we're going to hear from them behind me and also in this room. Welcome. As they applaud and make it known that they will be in D.C. on June 20th for the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington. Woo-hoo! Alabama, Arkansas, California, all right, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, New Jersey, New Hampshire, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, Washington, Washington, D.C., West Virginia. And we know that every state in this country will be present in D.C. on June 20th, 2020. Thank you.
For all you who have gathered here, particularly for the media, the excitement that you hear is that we have decided it is time for us to stop mourning, but to rise together to fight for the soul of this nation. And so the excitement you hear is the excitement when people decide that no longer will we be silent anymore. Now we want you to see the reason what's happening around the country, a brief video. The first part of it, I believe, Eric, where's Eric, is a sizzle reel that shows you some of the pain, because we also do a lot of crying, and we want this nation to cry, and it's heart to be broken so that it will change. But then also you will see what is happening and how we are rising throughout this country of every race, creed, color, sexuality, people of faith, impacted people, brothers and sisters in labor, religious organizations, even people not of faith, but who believe in a moral, okay, all right, great, who believe in the need for us to have a shift in our moral narrative and to build power. So if you would see this at this time. Bring it up, bring the sound up.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
My name is Pamela Gresham from Niles County, Alabama, and I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage, I don't have no money on pump. And I have to travel back and forth from Birmingham to take my daughter with CPAP machine. Don't have a car, don't have no way to take her.
There's a new chemical called
because we stand together. And we're asking in this Fusion Coalition for all of us to come together. Reverend Dr. Liz and I will open, and then we will have state leaders to come, and each one will have a minute and a half to share their stories. First, we start with impacted persons, then denominational body leaders, and then our labor leaders that are joining. All of our persons that are here are not here today, but they are represented in their commitment to this gathering together. And we are joining the nonviolent effort this morning of Swarm on the Capitol. After this, we are joining that nonviolent effort when we finish here today. We are here today. Is this one on too? Yeah, we are here today as a Moral Fusion Coalition to demand the nation addresses a moral, budgetary, and economic crisis. We actually are not just cursing the darkness, but we have produced, with some of the best economists and thinkers and impacted people, a moral budget that will address the interlocking injustices and can solve this issue of poverty. Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris and I stand with and serve 41 state coordinating committees, thousands of people impacted by poverty, and over 100 organizations and 16 national religious bodies. We have linked up together. Each group is strong in their own right, but we have decided that we are going to come together to address 5 interlocking injustices: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. This campaign is made up of poor and low-wealth people from across the nation, where we know 62 million people make less than a living wage. The one lady you just saw from West Virginia that said, "I'm poor, Randy," she's a teacher. And she says, "And yet I am working poor." Over 30 million people live without health care. 140 million people in America. 43% of the population are poor and low wealth. 52% of America's children are poor and low wealth, 39 million. 66 million white people are poor and low wealth. 26 million black people are poor and low wealth. 64% of Latinx people are poor and low wealth. 1/3 of all poor people live in the South. 250,000 people die every year from poverty and low wealth. 700 people a day die, Robin, and this is a national crisis. 7 people died from vaping, and we had hearings and even presidential attention. 700 people die every month from poverty, and we've not had, every day from poverty, and we've not had the same thing. More people are poor in this country than voted in the last election. A lot of the 100 million people who do not vote are poor and low wealth people that do not vote because they never hear debates about their conditions. We see a situation that constitutionally we demand establishment of justice, and our religious values say that nations will be judged by how nations treat the poor and the least of these. We are standing here today because we know poor and low wealth people, hold the key to shifting not only the moral narrative of our nation, but the political calculus of this nation. We are currently doing a study, will come out later, that shows, in fact, how if you just mobilize 5% of the adult members over 18 of the 140 million poor, it could fundamentally change the political calculus even in the South. We are not from red states or blue states. We are from the United States, and more importantly, from the human family. And we are fighting for a morality rooted in our deepest constitutional and religious values. Today, we are demanding that Congress and administration adopt a moral budget, which, unlike the existing federal budget, provides for the needs of poor and low-wealth people. We are challenging, and Liz will talk some about this, the lie of scarcity. We don't have it. We are showing in this budget that the cost of addressing poverty is less than the cost of poverty. The economic and social costs of poverty are high. One example, child poverty costs more than $1 trillion per year in loss of economic productivity and increase in health and crime costs. Denying people a living wage and a union, 15 and a union, costs this country over $300 billion a year into our economy. If we adjusted just one military budget that goes to one military contractor, we could address poverty. Every state that has denied health care could afford health care. Just a small tax on the very wealthy of this country could give us health care, education, and housing for all. We are here to demand a true impeachment trial of the current president. He has abused his power by pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political opponents, but politicians never abuse power without hurting real people. Corruption in our democracy and engaging in massive malfeasance and extreme tax cuts hurts poor and low wealth people the most. And so we, for a long time, have been calling for a moral impeachment. And that's why we're marching with our allies today. Poor people. Finally, poor people all over this country know that what we are watching McConnell do is he's pulling out the old Southern justice playbook, where the outcome is decided before a fake trial begins, just like it was in those that were tried that killed Emmett Till. We don't need an impeachment cover-up, and we don't need to cover up poverty and low wealth anymore. And we don't need to cover up the interlocking injustices of poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, the war economy, and religious nationalism. We are finally a movement that votes. We are mobilizing, educating, and registering. We call it more. We must do more. People for the movement who vote across this country. In Kentucky, our nonpartisan movement, working with Kentuckians for Commonwealth, working with the Poor People's Campaign there, we never endorsed a new candidate. We endorsed new issues. We went into the mountains. We went, Tanya, into the backwoods. We brought black folk from Louisville together with coal miners from Harlan County. And we pushed an agenda of expanding Medicaid. And the candidate that adopted our agenda won, because we were able to change the political calculus in counties where people had been ignored. So we are white folks from Appalachia and the Wheat Belt and the Rust Belt. We are African Americans from rural Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, and the cities of our nation. We are immigrants. We are documented and undocumented who contribute to the wealth of our nation. And we are coming to D.C. on June 2020, not for just an event, but for a generationally transformative moment in this movement, where poor and low wealth people, not people speaking for them, but where poor and low wealth people of every race and creed and faith and sexuality will get on the stage to put a face on this moral crisis, to tell their stories and break the heart and the conscience of this nation and demand to be heard before the political conventions even assemble. And we're doing it after the primaries, before the convention, to say, you don't have to ask us to vote for you. What you have to do is address our issues and deal with our agenda, and we'll know who to vote for. We are coming to say this is a movement not just for 2020, but 2020 and beyond. Somebody's been hurting the poor people and low wealth people. It's gone on far too long. We won't be silent anymore. Democrats have run from poverty. Republicans have racialized poverty, and it's time for us to deal with the reality of poverty. Would you welcome my sister, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris?
Good morning. Good morning. We are here this morning because we can't be silent. As sham trials for the wealthy and powerful go on, at the same time as our country criminalizes the poor simply for being poor. When the same people who suppress voting rights and block health care, who keep wages low and separate families through unjust immigration policies, who are on the hunt for war as they deregulate water, then people who don't have health care or housing, whose lives are being shortened by pollution, whose families are being destroyed by racist policies, people from all walks of life, from all races, creeds, colors, religions, and places are rising together around a moral budget and a common agenda. We have a saying in our work that when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Right. This budget, this movement lifts from the bottom, and everybody indeed can rise. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has found, indeed, as Dr. Barber said, that the costs of poverty, the costs of inequality, the costs of racism, of warmongering, far outweigh the cost of what it will take to address these injustices. Listen to that. The costs of poverty are much greater than the cost of resolving injustice altogether. Unstable housing costs $111 billion in education and healthcare costs. Gender and racial wealth gaps cost workers $2.6 trillion per year in lost earnings. But at the same time, $1 billion in SNAP benefits creates $1.70 billion in economic growth. That investing in food, investing in SNAP, feeding people creates more jobs per dollar than investing in the military. Every dollar invested in early childhood education leads to $7.30 in savings. Poverty and inequality costs more than ending it. As Reverend Dr. Barber said, there is an emergency going on in our society. We have fewer voting rights today than we did 54 years ago. Over the past 2 decades, 57,000 workers have committed suicide because their wages are too low. There are 15 million families who cannot afford water, although this world is made of 2/3 water. That's why the Poor People's Campaign is building power. Because it doesn't have to be this way. We do not have a scarcity of resources. We have a scarcity of political will. So today, we are lifting up this moral budget. We are demanding that it be implemented. We are continuing to call for a full debate on poverty in this election season. We are joining actions to swarm the Senate and demand witnesses, evidences, a real impeachment trial. We are gathered with organizational leaders who are mobilizing for June 20th. And this evening, we will march from the Wilson Building to the Church of the Epiphany, connecting poverty and racism and injustice here in Washington, D.C. to communities all across this nation. We know that we must do more. We must mobilize, we must organize, we must register and educate people for a movement that votes. All roads lead to June 20, 2020. June 20, 2020.
As we prepare now, we want to hear from people, as we say, the real voices, the agency of poor and low-wealth people who will come and share their stories and why they are mobilizing for June 20, 2020, why they are lifting up this budget as well, why we are demanding, not merely asking. Let me say very quickly, why June 20th? It's the day before the summer solstice, the brightest day on the earth. We are saying it's time for a light to be put on poverty and low wealth.
That's right.
It's right after the primaries, just a few weeks before the conventions. Another point we want to drive home, 53 cents of every discretionary dollar goes to the military, less than 15 cents to education, health care, and it doesn't really even go to the military, it goes to military contractors. And that's why veterans and people are rising with us as well. One more nugget. In North Carolina, for instance, there are 4.1 million poor people. The current leadership of the country, the current president, won by only 150,000 votes in North Carolina. And it's like that all over the South. Poor and low wealth people hold the political calculus to change this nation, not just in one election, but to change the whole debate. But we must have, as Liz said, televised national debates that deal with poverty. We've had 30-some debates since 2016, and not one has dealt totally with what affects 43% of this nation. That cannot exist any longer. And so at this time, we want to invite to come together and Callie Greer, who's from Selma, Savannah Kinsley from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Sharon Levine from Cancer Alley, Louisiana, Irene Montanus from Central California, Sophia Helena from Des Moines, Iowa, Joyce Atkins from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and Lude Murphy from Washington, D.C. They will come and stand together, and each of them will take 2 minutes to share their story and why they are mobilizing with us. Would you come at this time?
Good morning, America. Good morning. Good morning, America. Good morning. My name is Callie Greer, and I hail from Selma, Alabama. And I just want to say that the Poor People's Campaign, I've always had a voice, but it was not heard in this way. I've never been able to really join with folks that could have empathy and sympathy for me at the same time, that believed in me, that lifted me up and cared that my daughter had died and it wasn't God's work. People tell you, it wasn't God's work. This policy killed her. Politicians killed my daughter. So it's important for you to hear these numbers that Reverend Barbara just said. I mean, they're mind-blowing. I'm always knocked off my feet to know that this many people are struggling and this room is not overpacked with people. And I know it's a poverty issue that they're not. But for June 2020, I am going to, if I know you and you got money, I'm begging you for some money. I'm coming, just letting you know I'm coming to you. I'm asking you for some money to send to the Poor People's Campaign to get us some buses so folks that can't pay their way come. You know you got a little extra change in your pocket. So we're going to need you to do that. We're going to need you to support this campaign. So if you can't come, folks will come for you. You understand what I'm saying? Because this is so important. Not only are people they're hurting our people, they're killing our people. So for June 2020, get in your mind, sell cookies, sell fish sandwiches, sell chicken boxes. Get the people to Washington, D.C. for June 2020.
Callie Greer lost her daughter because of the policies of a governor and a legislature, died in front of her, and she's organizing. Would we have our dear sister from Jonestown? Is that right? Yeah. Jonestown, Pennsylvania. Where is she? Savannah. Come on, Savannah.
Thank you.
As Reverend Barber said, my name is Savannah Kinsey, and I'm a co-coordinator of the Johnstown Healthcare Rights Committee of Put People First PA. Put People First is a human rights organization whose current campaign of healthcare is human rights. Put People First is a leading force in the PA Poor People's Campaign. We plan on actively participating in the June 20th mass march because healthcare is a human right and a public good for all. Currently, Pennsylvania is fighting back against fracking and pipelines running through the state, which have an impact on our health and the health of the environment. Only 30 miles from my hometown, children are getting the devastating news of having rare forms of cancer due to the current lack of environmental protections in Pennsylvania. This shows the connection between health of the environment and the human health. Poverty is another reason why Pennsylvania residents are willing to fight for justice. In my hometown of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, there is a poverty. Day by day, many jobs, homes, infrastructure, and even people continue to leave town. Most of us who are just one paycheck away from homelessness cannot afford degradation that is taking our lives. Be here to march and take a stand for our lives. Thank you.
And in your hometown, the hospital was closed, right? In that area. Claim that that's so-called Trump country, but we're organizing and taking back even those areas. I want the media to understand. All right.
Yeah.
Our next dear,
Thank you.
Cancer Alley. My goodness.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Sharon Levine. I'm from St. James, Louisiana. 2,000 people. We have 7 districts, and I live in the 5th district. In St. James, we have 12. We have one that wants to come in. It's called Formosa, or FG. They want to build a $9.4 billion industry. It's not even 2 miles from where I live. When I found out in the spring of 2018 that it was coming to me, I couldn't take that. I retired. I formed an organization called Rise St. James. I didn't know what to do, so I prayed. And I asked God if he wanted me to sell my home. He told me no. I asked God if he wanted me to sell my land. He told me no. I asked him ever since. He taught me how to fight. I met so many people that came to me to help me. My organization started on October 20th, 2000. I met Reverend Barbara and Dr. Liz and all the other members. And I'm so glad that they have me here today because we need help. They want to put this plant right next to my home, and it's not going to happen. I spoke to the governor of Louisiana on November 1st. He came to St. James to ask for our vote. We voted him in. I haven't heard from him since. I've been trying to talk to his people at his office. I called 3 times. They won't invite me to come to speak with them. So we've been doing marches. And we're trying to get help wherever we can. So I ask you all to pray for us. Because we found grave sites on the land where Formosa want to be built. And we're trying to fight that.
Amen.
So thank you.
Let me say before you even clap, and I should have said this, what we do instead of clapping, because people one time told us, don't clap at our store. We say somebody's hurting our people and it's gone on far too long. Yes. So we could say that refrain and then we were there and one family showed us they had 5 members to die in 4 weeks. Yes. From the cancer that is being put on these people, and it's been there for years, and they knew it. Children in schools are forced to deal with the issues, and there's so much more, and it's all poor black and white and brown people. Yes. And that's why, say this together, say we must fight now. Fight now. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on. Far too long. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We met Irene. Would you come?
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene Montantes. I'm here as a representative of the Indigenous People Collective from the Northeast San Fernando Valley of Southern California. California is home to thousands of Native Americans. Currently, there are roughly 175,000 Native Americans that call the Los Angeles area home. the Indigenous Peoples Collective stand in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign. For too long, we have witnessed the deterioration of the lives of Indigenous people in the U.S. Many reservations across the country are stricken with extreme poverty and ecological devastation. For too many, life on reservation is harsh. Waters are contaminated, the effects of extractive industries have laid waste to our territories and traditional economies, forcing us into a Western capital system that have destroyed and disrupted our balance with nature. The increased militarization of our lands and borders have led to further destruction of our lands and reductions to our freedoms and rights to our mobility. Across the country, Native people have fought to protect the lands and ecological systems on which we live. But today, settler encroachment and Western development are forcing many to leave or being arrested. Moreover, in regards to Los Angeles, while the homeless crisis is perhaps most visible in California, with many sleeping on sidewalks, in tents, vehicles, or in shelters on any given night in Los Angeles, according to a recent study by Los Angeles County Homeless Service Authority, it is estimated that 59,000 is the count of these sleeping and what I just mentioned. In the world's richest nation, homelessness on this scale should be shameful and shocking. But most are no longer either shocked or ashamed. Increasingly, compassion is being replaced by resignation. It is imperative that we act now so that we don't wake up in 5 or 10 years wondering where we are at or where we could possibly have been or why we kept quiet. This, my friends, is why I'm here, to mobilize for June 2020. Thank you.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Thank you. I met our next, where's Sophia? Hey, here in Des Moines, Iowa, when we marched in 9-degree temperature with hundreds of people on the Democratic debate, and we plan to march on Republicans too, and demanded a nationally televised, and for the first time in history, 2 presidential candidates acknowledged the Poor People's Campaign and called for, joined us, a nationally televised debate on poverty. Sophia, would you share your story?
Good morning. My name is Sophia Helena Mace-Detricht. When I joined the Navy, at 18, right out of high school, I joined under the antiquated premise that it would be a path to a self-sufficiency that I didn't know how to achieve. When I was discharged for being transgender 10 years later, I was no closer to that goal than the frightened child with the brave face who left. When I was considered no longer acceptable to the war economy, I was cast out, unprepared, and completely alone. I faced hunger, homelessness, humiliating, degrading, and uncertain work that could never pay the bills because I was politically inconvenient. I started working with Common Defense, a progressive veterans organization, and they put me to dignified work for the first time in nearly 10 years. Afterwards, I was directed to the Poor People's Campaign. I met Reverend Barber. We marched on the debate, and we are organizing veterans, and we're organizing poor people in Iowa to come back here on June 20th, 2020, so that nobody else has to suffer the indignities that I have.
Thank you, Sophia. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. All right. We now want to ask our dear sister Joyce Atkins if she'd come from Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I need a few placards on poverty that people can hold up here, hold some of the ones that we have authorized to be so that the nation can see them together. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so when my kids were very small, my husband at the time, he was a Vietnam veteran, and he became mentally disabled. And so we lost our source of income, and with that we lost our mobile home. and we moved into a very old house that had little or no insulation in it. When winter came, all we had was a wood-burning stove, but we didn't have money to buy wood. So my husband found some old railroad ties. Railroad ties are covered with creosote. You don't want creosote in your chimney. It easily burns down the house, but we were fortunate. All it did was put soot all over everything in the house. The other thing that happened that winter, it didn't keep us very warm. The toilet water actually froze in the toilet. But I was still one of the lucky ones. I lived in Warren County, which is not a poor Kentucky county, and there's a university there. And so with the help of a friend that actually took me into Bowling Green every day on his way to work, I was able to go back to school, and I became a social worker. And so here I am 30 years later, having worked with poverty for my entire career, and knowing that the poor take the brunt of everything that happens, whether that is mass incarceration, or whether that is a tornado that hits, or whether that is the new tax laws. And even having worked for the state of Kentucky for 30 years, I found last year when I went to pay my taxes that I owed so much in federal tax money, I didn't have the money to pay it. I had to sell 2 used cars just to pay my federal taxes last year. So I am here partly to demand that we have a fair impeachment trial. I am here mostly to prepare for June 20th, 2020, when we will come to stand up for the 43% of people in this country that are poor or low income. Thank you.
Somebody hurting our people.
It's hurting our people.
And it's gone on.
It's gone on.
Far too long.
Far too long.
And we won't be silent.
And we won't be silent.
Anymore.
If
you heard her say, one of the things we went out to Kentucky, we met people in Hazard County who told us stories of poverty and incarceration that were very similar to what we heard in cities from African American people. And folk are starting to understand the connections and joining together. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Lucy Murphy right here in Washington, D.C., who has been a great warrior all of her life. Come on, Lucy.
Thank you. As Bishop Barber said, I am Lucy Murphy, a lifelong Washingtonian who is watching my neighbors being moved out because of high rents. And I represent black women who went to college, who expected that because of their education and their qualifications, they would be able to secure full-time employment with benefits. I have worked my whole life as a temporary worker, annual contracts which expire, and not being able to count on a steady income which would enable me to buy a house. I am working with the Poor People's Campaign, Empower D.C., One D.C. and the Gray Panthers and the Poor People's Campaign for June 20, 2020, because I want to see the tremendous amount of money in this country that goes to the military, for that money to instead go for education, housing for all, health care. Everybody has a right to live.
Yes. Somebody hurting our people. And it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Do you know that this budget, we found out, if you cut our current military budget by half, $350 billion, we would still have more money in the military than China, Iran, North Korea, and Iraq combined. And still be able to blow the world up 50 times. The reality is we have greed rather than grace that is controlling the money and the politics. And we are an organism. If you notice, not an organization, an organism. We're not asking anybody to leave their organization. We need every organization. But every now and then in history, the organizations like tributaries in a river must come together to flow as one. Even if they don't do but one or two things together to make it better for all of us. At this time, we want to hear now from our denominational and faith leaders, And I'm going to ask the Reverend Robin Tanner to come. Where is Reverend Dr. Tanner, who is leading us? And Adam, are you here? The two of you, if they would come and introduce our denominational faith body leaders. Some are not here. We do want to add the National Council of Churches to have a say for a minute. But we have 16 denominational groups that have said they are all in. Sikhs, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Unitarian. So Robin, if you'd come and introduce these leaders at this time. They're right here in front of Adam.
So first we would like to hear from Reverend Dr. Alvin Jackson, followed by Reverend Dr. J. Herbert Nelson, stated clerk of the Presbyterian Church USA. We could have those two in that order, and then we'll call up the next two.
I'm Alvin Jackson, from a native of the Delta of Mississippi, and I stand here today as a past moderator of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and currently serving as Executive Director of the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 20, 2020, here in Washington, D.C. I stand here today with my brothers, the co-director of the Mass Poor People's Assembly, the Reverend Rob Stevens, and the Reverend Dr. John Gillette from Lexington, Kentucky, who serves as president of the National Convocation of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. We stand today with all of you saying somebody is hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Yes, Jim. Yes, right after. Thank you so much. And what is unique here is these are denominational bodies, not just individual. This is powerful to come together, and we'll be releasing a full list of all in all of the interfaith work. Jim, are you here? Well, no, Herbert, Doctor. Yeah, he's going to take care of Liz. Make sure you got to have your own denomination. That's right. Stand up here beside your man, Liz. That's right. I don't know if that sounded right on TV, but anyway.
Let me first say that we, as the Presbyterian Church USA, stand in significant solidarity with this particular movement. It was Eugene Carson Blake during the 1960s that stood with Dr. King. It helped to develop the civil rights bill, who also took time in the midst of all of that to be a part of orchestrating the meeting with Dr. King and the President of the United States, and to go to the White House after his speech. I want to say that we have continually been a denomination that is committed to the issues of justice, to continue to walk faithfully, knowing that Jesus calls us to be faithful witnesses in this present age. Jesus said the poor would be with us always. I don't think that was a matter of fact to say, in essence, that people will have to be poor all of their lives. That's right. But it is the benign neglect of the wealthy and the powerful, and even governments and principalities, who forget that poor people exist, who do not have their minds on what it means to understand the abundance that God has given. There is enough if we learn to share it. There is enough if we learn not to take too much. There is enough if we stand firm in the liberty where the one who has given us life, health, and strength sets us free. I want to thank Dr. Barber and Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Presbyterian Church USA, for the great work that has been done in not just leading the nation and the world to this cause, but also leading the Presbyterian Church USA to embrace the work that we are continuing to do in the 21st century. The last thing that I will say is we will be in our General Assembly. It will open up on the very same day as the Poor People's Campaign will be here in Washington, D.C. We will be sending buses to this event. I'm sorry that I will not be here in present that day, but know that my heart and spirit is with me. I have a responsibility to the Assembly, but we are making sure that we will be represented and that people will be in this place because this is our cause as well. And we believe that this is Jesus' cause, which means we have to be where Jesus calls us.
That's right.
Thank you, and God bless you, and for the great work that is being done.
Awesome, thank you. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
We will now hear from the President and General Secretary of the National Council of Churches, James Winkler, followed by Joyce Ajluni, the American Friends Service Committee General Secretary.
Good morning. Good morning. I bring you greetings in the name of Jesus and in the name of the National Council of Churches. 30 million Christians in 100,000 local churches, Orthodox churches, peace churches, black churches, white churches, including Greenleaf Christian Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and this very church, St. Mark's Episcopal Church here in Washington, D.C. We all stand united with you in the sacred struggle to end racism and poverty and war that has marked our country for far too long. I've been part of movements all my life. I carried a document called The Budget is a Moral Document and placed it in the hands of Senator Harry Reid when he was Majority Leader of the United States Senate some years ago. He looked at us and he said, you know, all my life I've thought of the budget as simply a budget. He said, but you're right. It's a moral document. I'm going to read this into the record of the Senate. And I was part of a group of faith leaders that were arrested in the rotunda of the Capitol years ago, fighting for against cuts in programs that help the poorest and most marginalized among us. We've had a faithful budget campaign over the years, and thank God we're going to take this moral budget over to the Congress now. We got a lot of work to do, and this is the group that's going to get it done. Lastly, I want you to know that in June, when the Poor People's March takes place, a group of Christians are coming from Korea. And they're coming here not only to be part of this march. In fact, I told them you got to come and also be part of this march because they see the connection between the U.S. military occupation of the Korean Peninsula and the struggle that we're part of here. But in this very church, on June 23rd, they're going to have a worship service. We're going to have a march here on the Capitol because we're going to call for an end to the Korean War. It's still not over. It's only in a ceasefire since 1953. So all of these struggles are connected. And I'm glad to be with you. God is good. And all the time.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joyce Ajluni, General Secretary for the American Service Committee, a Quaker organization with work in over 15 countries and 30 U.S. cities. Throughout the last century, AFSC has been guided by the Quaker belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people to free the world of violence, inequality, and oppression. AFSC was one of the principal endorsers of the original Poor People's Campaign in 1968. Following Dr. King's assassination, AFSC and other organizers chose to continue the work he started and mobilized people across the country to come to Washington, D.C. for protests. Here we are again, called to action in a time of great moral corruption in our politics. Racist and xenophobic policies have led this country to close its doors to immigrants and criminalize communities of color. Investments in a violent war economy have only increased while millions of Americans are thrown into poverty. We're here to support the moral budget. AFSC will mobilize, we're all in, resources, people, its wide networks of Quakers, communities, and its allies to join the We Must Do More tour and Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington this June 20th to revive the moral imperative for human rights and social justice and stand by those who choose to act from love rather than from hate. We are standing in solidarity as Quakers, as communities, to end this charade against the poor. Thank you.
Somebody's been hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silenced anymore. So in addition to having powerful leaders from faith communities all across this country representing millions, we have folks from the labor movement. So I'm going to call up Roz Pellis, who's going to introduce those who are going to be introduced today from labor unions across the country that are standing with the Poor People's Campaign. So I introduce to you Roz Pellis, who will bring others up.
Labor team step up, they here.
Yeah, I'm Roz
Roz behind me.
Yeah.
I'm not Roz. I do everything Roz says, but I'm not Roz.
Remember that he said that. Good morning, I am Roz Pellis, and I am delighted and honored to introduce the labor leaders in this country who represent millions of workers who stand on the right side of history, who stand with the poor and low-income folks in this country, who every day stand up for working folks, who every day are standing for the rights of all folks. So today I want to start with introducing Sarah Steffens. She is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Communication Workers of America. She is on the steering committee of the Poor People's Campaign, and I will ask her to do the introductions of her brothers and sisters from the labor movement. Sarah?
And as Sarah comes, I want to mention one item of history and how important this is. And I tear up some about it. When the war on poverty happened, and when Cesar Chavez and the Jewish Federation and Martin Luther King and the national welfare rights, never just say it was Dr. King. It actually was the welfare rights women that really pushed, right? But when they decided 50 years ago to deal with poverty, militarism, and racism, a lot of folk left. Labor, civil rights organizations, and it was a mistake then. God has let us live long enough, Lee and Randy, to correct that history. Because it was King and Chavez and others that said the only constituency that could fundamentally change this country is when black people and poor low-income white people and labor found a way to come together to build power, right? And to change the moral narrative. And Robin, come on up here is your people here we have been in fights together, all of us. But on last year, when these labor leaders came, and they spoke, but then they said, I want you to hear from one of my members. I have heard people say that was one of the most powerful moments they had ever seen. And I want to thank every one of them. And Robin, I remember when we were fighting for people in hog plants down in North Carolina, and folk told us we couldn't win. Told us we couldn't win, and we won. And if we stand together and correct history, there is no telling what transformation we can make both now and in the future. So I just had to say that from the depths of my heart.
That's right.
Thank you. All right. So I'm really proud to be here on behalf of CWA. We represent 700,000 workers in telecom, airlines, media, manufacturing, healthcare, and public service. And I'm proud also to be on the steering committee of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, because I know that we must do more. At CWA, like all my fellow unions that are here today, we know that we're not going to win these struggles if we all continue to see them as separate issues. We can't turn our country around that way. And as labor activists, we understand that poverty is not inevitable. The problem has never been that our economy cannot support housing and food for poor people. The problem has always been that the rich can never be satisfied. The wealthiest among us, the billionaires, the corporate CEOs, their Wall Street enablers, there's no such thing as enough for them. And that's the problem that we fight every single day in our unions. So we have an amazing group of union supporters here today. I'm mostly here to introduce them, but I also want to give a shout out to some unions that are supporting and that don't have elected leadership here on the stage today. SEIU and the Fight for 15, huge backers. Go ahead and give them a little shout out, but a quick one as we go. The NEA, the Steelworkers, the painters, the IUPAT. Unite here because one job should be enough. I'm going to give the whole list of everybody who's here speaking, and then you all can queue up and go one at a time. We have Lee Saunders, the president of AFSCME. Randy Weingarten, the president of AFT. Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Everett Kelly from AFGE. Robin Williams, vice president of UFCW, and Liz Powell of APWU. All right, and I'll give over the mic. Thanks.
Okay. Morning, everybody. Morning. I am Lee Saunders, president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We're a union of public service workers across the country, dedicated to making our communities safer, making our communities stronger. So on behalf of the 1.4 million members of AFSCME, I am proud to express our support for this march and for Reverend Barber's courageous and relentless work on behalf of America's most marginalized people. Economic inequality is tearing at our national fabric. CEO pay continues to soar.
Yes, sir.
As top executives make 278 times more than the average worker. Immigrants are demonized. People of color are marginalized. Voter suppression is alive and well. Families of all races are forced to send their children to underfunded schools and can't see a doctor when they're sick. Something is wrong with this picture. But Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign are helping to lead a movement moment in this country. Everywhere you look, people are staring down injustice and rising up to defend their values. Working people demanding fair wages and benefits, basic dignity and respect. Young people demanding safety from gun violence. That's right. Women marching for their rights. African Americans fighting systemic racism. People demanding an action on climate change. Ordinary people organizing, mobilizing, and agitating for change. That is the movement moment. We are the movement moment. A rising wave of grassroots energy for freedom and justice. I'm proud that my union is a part of it, to stand with all of you across this country. And I'm proud to show AFSCME solidarity with Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris as they take up Dr. King's mantle, as they lead the struggle against poverty and prejudice, as they issue a bold and brave call to action to all of us. Sisters and brothers, we hear the call, and we accept the challenge.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Yes, sir. Somebody hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
My name is Randy Weingarten. We represent 1.7 million people who every single day try to make a difference in the lives of others. We need to fight poverty, not the poor. We need to fight illiteracy, not the child. We need to fight inequality, not the worker. And that is what we are all doing by caring, by fighting, by showing up, and then by voting. But without the mobilization of this moment, of the Poor People's Campaign, people feel isolated and alone. Like the member I just saw in Guernica, Puerto Rico, whose home was devastated by the earthquake in the same week that the government called her son up to fight in Iraq.
My God, my God.
The same week that the U.S. government did that, the current president was silent on the fact that she is now living in a tent city. This is the face of poverty. This is the face of inequality. But we together, as Reverend Barber said, what we've learned long ago in the labor movement is that when we bind together, as our religious faiths tell us as well, when we bind together, walk together, act together, we can do what is impossible to do alone. That's right. So this union, the AFT, is not only here with the Poor People's Campaign on 6/20/2020, but we will walk together in every place, at every river, at every stream, in every street, to fight this injustice for the freedom to live.
Somebody hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
My name is Sarah Nelson. I'm the president of the Association of Flight Attendants CWA, representing 50,000 flight attendants at 20 different airlines, some of them flying over us right now, raining down solidarity on this event today. And I'm here to speak the truth. I'm here to speak the truth that the labor movement is for all working people. I'm here to speak the truth that the people that I represent are among the working poor. The airline industry and all industries have created barriers for some workers and tried to define some work as less than other work, as less value than other work. Our flight attendants at regional airlines are making 45% less than the flight attendants working at United and American and Delta and Alaska, flying the same routes, doing the same work as aviation's first responders, taking care of people, making sure that they are safe, healthy, and secure. But they are making 45% less. At Air Wisconsin right now, 12 years without a raise, and the first-year flight attendants making $15,000 a year, sleeping in their cars, sleeping in airports, and when they sleep in the airports, the management tells them it's undignified and they can't do that. This is the truth. And this is why my executive board, many of them who come from these regional airlines, have fully endorsed and partnered with the Poor People's Campaign. But I'll tell you something. A lot of people like to say it's the rich and powerful. Oh, no, no. They're just rich. They just have resources. We have power. Solidarity is a force stronger than gravity, and it lifts us up. And flight attendants know how to bring people together, and that is what we are going to do for June 20th. Now, I want to call out one member in our room right here, because earlier this month he was ordained in the Episcopal Church of New Hampshire, Steve Eckerberg, and now I get to say Reverend Steve Eckerberg over there. And I had the privilege of joining him in his ordination, and he called upon the whole church to make contributions to bring people on buses from New Hampshire to Washington, D.C., so that we can come together, we can share these stories, and we can lift up the fact that we are in this together. And we have power together. And somebody's
hurting our people, and it's
gone on far too long, and we won't stand silent anymore.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Good morning. My name is Everett Kelly. I serve presently as acting president of AFSCME, and we stand here today to reassure our support for this movement, the Poor People's Campaign. We understand perfectly well what it is to live in poverty. I myself understand perfectly well as a 31-year pastor in a small town in Alabama, around Anniston, Alabama, where I had the opportunity to see people suffer because of big companies being able to just dump chemicals in deprived areas. And so I understand, and so I took this assignment very well. And so we're here, and we're here to adopt, support this moral budget, because we believe as Americans and as American Federation of Government Employees that this budget will ensure that 50,000 vacancies in the VA will be filled. We believe that we're in this fight, and we're in this fight together. We believe this is our fight. And we have to stand together, united, to fight together. And Brother Barber, we're with you. AFGE will be with you in June of 2020. We will be united, and we will fight together. Can we fight together?
Yeah.
Are we in this together?
Yeah.
Is this our fight?
Yeah.
Let's fight together. Thank you.
Somebody hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Liz Powell. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the American Postal Workers Union. In Chicago, Illinois, in 2014, when Reverend Barber addressed us, he gave us a history lesson, and then he told us of his plan for the Poor People's Campaign. When he finished, we knew that it was a journey he could not take by himself. So immediately, we passed a resolution unanimously supporting him in the Poor People's Campaign and whatever else he may decided to do. Not only did we do that, we made him an honorary member of the American Postal Workers Union, so he's one of us. You know, we joined with all of you in the fight. Systemic poverty, economic devastation. We are the labor movement. There's a liaison between labor and civil rights. One cannot go without the other.
That's right.
We each fight for economic justice, social justice, human rights, everything, women's rights every day. And I'm here on behalf of the membership of the American Postal Workers Union while we fight to maintain a public, vibrant postal service for all of you. Because they're trying to do it to us too. But we're here to recommit our support and send out to our members, our locals, our community, our family, and our friends all of the information for June 2020. Thank you so very much.
Somebody hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Good morning, family.
Good morning.
I'm Robin Williams. I'm from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union on behalf of our president, President Mark Perone. We represent 1.2 million workers throughout the United States and Canada. We represent workers in meatpacking, food processing, grocery, retail, and we are here standing united with the Poor People's Campaign.
All right.
Reverend Barber has been with the United Food and Commercial Workers for many years. Since the early, 2000s, fighting for Smithfield workers in North Carolina, in the biggest hog plant in the world. Reverend Barber was with us then. He's been with us ever since. From the NAACP to Moral Mondays to the Poor People's Campaign. The UFCW is with all working people. It's a proud day for me today that all of labor here, the largest affiliations that represent working people and all people, we stand here together with these leaders to represent all people and be a part of this nation movement, moving forward, that all of us, all of God's children, no matter black, white, gay, lesbian, Christian, Jewish, we are all in this together.
That's right.
And I thank you so much for allowing the labor movement to be a part of all of you.
And it's gone on far too long. Won't be silent anymore. I want to ask Dr. Jackson and Rob to come forward and Roz to stand as we prepare to close, but we will take some questions. My brothers and sisters, there are moments that you have to gather because what it does is it changes the narrative. It changes you from a narrative of mourning and weeping over what has happened to rising and fighting against what has happened and changing it. One of the theme songs we're using for this is the song that says, "It's not the waking, it's the rising." It's a song that was dedicated to Nina Simone. And the song basically says you can be woke, but that's not enough, because you can be woke in bed. There comes a place you got to wake up and get out of bed and do more than send a tweet or an email. But people need to see people so that the people will move. There's a scripture in the Bible in Psalms 118 that says, the stones that the builders rejected have now become the chief cornerstones, and this is the day the Lord has made. The rejected of this nation must lead this revival. Must lead a revival and a transformation. We cannot wait another 50 years. It took black folk 400 years to get from 0 to 725. You catch that in a minute. We can't wait another 400 years to get to 15. A nation cannot ultimately survive. You will never be able to fix the economy of this nation when 43% of the people live in poverty and low wealth. There's an economist at MIT that says the problem of this country is in its economics is conscience. It's conscience. And so we must shift the conscience. We must point people not just to an election year strategy, yes, that too, but also we must elect to decide that we are not going to allow this to exist, and it doesn't have to. That's right. And it's historic. Now, we've asked folk that want to come in. We've not begged anybody, because even in the communities, we had somebody that came in one of our meetings and said, this ain't going to happen. We said, now, you sure you want to be here? Because some of us have decided, like Cesar Chavez, that once a people understand they don't have to be afraid and they start, you cannot undo the start. That's right. I don't know if, Lee, we're the group that's going to start it and somebody else is going to finish it, or we're the group that's going to finish it. But what I know is God has let all of us together come together. We didn't know each other when we were born. No, most of us in this room. And some of us are on our latter years, because if you pass 60, you might have another 30. But you probably don't have 60. I'm not being morbid. I'm just being real, right? You might have another 30. You probably don't have 60. And the reality is there comes a time that you have to decide what you're going to do with what you have left. And somebody one day said, "Remember, you crippled?" I said, "Well, no." I said Moses couldn't talk. And Elijah had depression. And Paul had a thorn in the flesh. It's not but there are people more crippled than I am from poverty and pain. And when I see them rising, when I see them willing to stand and fight, every morning I get up, pain. But when I come and stand with the people, no pain. I've had no pain standing up here with the people, because I know that together we not only heal one another, but we can heal this nation. Now, there's one other group that we want to mention, because we're changing history, and that is, we got a call from the Panhellenic.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm trying to say some history, because there were a lot of things. The whole story is, you know, when King and others in '68, and even though we look also back to the 1800s for how we model this moral fusion, but King was 75% not liked in the polls. Yeah. He was 25% higher than Trump. I mean, we need to remember that history. And a lot of folk walked away.
That's right.
The Pan said, listen, we're going to be in this time. And so the Alphas are in the room. Come on, stand. The Alpha and Omegas are in the room. Kappas are in the room. All right? And who we have today is, come on up, Alpha Phi Alpha, Kevin and Gregory Phillips and Sigma Gamma Rho. Are you here, Cynthia? And Delta Sigma Theta. They're all coming. Who did I miss? Alpha Kappa Alpha, AKA, don't miss the AKAs. And they are organizing, and they are intentionally reaching out to their members who are poor and low wealth, and they said they are coming to be in this fight to make up this number, a number that will speak to the entire nation and wake up this sleeping giant. And understand, if we don't wake up but 10% of 140 million, my goodness gracious, if just 10% will wake up, and 10% will get up, and 10% will go to the polls, and 10% will stay in the movement. What a day of transformation it will be. So we are together. We understand that somebody's hurting our brothers and sisters. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. We are empirical. We got the data and audit. We've got a solution. We're not just cursing the darkness. And we've got the issues that we must address together. Systemic racism. That's voter suppression. That's resegregation, underfunding of our public schools. That's incarceration. That's mistreatment of our native brothers and indigenous brothers and sisters. That's the injustice toward immigrants, particularly our Latinos. Poverty. That includes health care denial, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. Liz and I, she's Armenian, I'm black, Tuscarora, and a little bit white, and she's female, I'm male, but we're together. When you get a call from Dr. Alvin Jackson or Rob or Roz, it's just like us calling. Please respond to them. Liz and I got 15 more stops to do between now and May, where we're headed out to mobilize people all across this country. And this is a Poor People's Assembly moral march on Washington. And it is not an end. It is a sign that somebody's hurting our brothers, our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Amen? Amen. Are there any questions from members of the media before we march over and go over to the Capitol? Is it the Capitol? Where are we headed? To the Hart Building. We're going to go to the Hart Building until America gets a heart. Is there any media? We know the time New York was here and others. Media, feel free to talk to anybody here. Layla McDowell, where's Layla? She's working with us. Layla, please, all of the organizations here, please connect your media people to Layla McDowell, who's leading our effort here with this effort. Are we all good? Mass meeting tonight. We start a march at 5:30 from at the Wilson Building to Church of the Epiphany. You know, Epiphany. Is that right? Right? And then we have our mass meeting. Live stream. Thousands of people will be on live stream. Join us there. To all the folk that are online from the 43 states, stay in it, keep organizing. We'll see you June 20th, 2020 in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue. We have some announcements real quick from Rob.
Forward together. Forward together. If you could still your heart and your body real quick while we just try to move from here. So you're going to want to hear what I say if you want to get out of this room. That's not a real, but we'll let everyone out. But we are going to do something very orderly from here. We have shifted from what we did before. Thank you for shushing. Because we know that a movement needs to be nimble. We thank all the partners that are here. We know that there's lots of national partners here. As you see, we have a full packed schedule today because we want to do it all. And we're going to work with y'all later. All right, now you're listening? Yes. All right, so we're going to move from here to the Hart Building. We are joining the Swarm. Now, the Swarm, the Senate, is a group of that has come together with a CPD and Women's March and many others. And we decided to be nimble and be a part of this movement for our friends in the cause. We will be moving over to the Hart Building where there will be a silent action, and then we'll be going to the Capitol. There are some people who are doing civil disobedience. In the Poor People's Campaign, we're not in a position right now to do that. We've done it.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it just messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.